Let's bring in our next conversation piece on News at Prime. The Science, Technology and Innovation Department is facing a budget shortfall of 377 million rand. Minister Dr. Blade Nzimande tabled his 9 billion rand budget for 25-26, and he's promising to drive innovation across townships and rural areas despite the constrained resources. But critics say underfunding, inequality in research support and dysfunction in some of the key agencies are holding back progress. Dr. Nzimande joins us this evening to talk about his department's plans. Minister, good evening. Thank you as always for your time. We appreciate it. So as I've shared, that budget has been cut again following a 1.4 billion reduction last year. How can you realistically expect to deliver on what is an ambitious STI agenda with a shrinking budget?
Good evening, Iman, to you and your viewers and listeners. Look, the question we are asking is a very important question. I also conceded to that from all the political parties, in fact, in the debate yesterday, to say that the funding of science, technology and innovation in our country is woefully inadequate. But in many respects, despite that, we are punching above our weight, because we are pursuing strategies that, even if they do not cover everything, but they are enabling us to be able to get some extra resources. For instance, the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, which is one of our premier entities in science, despite its own shortfall, but they are making some extra money from the projects that they are actually doing. The second thing that I highlighted yesterday, insofar as funding is concerned, is that we are going to be making a case to National Treasury. We know that National Treasury can only go thus far. But in addition to this, what we also want to do is to go to major industrial and economic funders within government, outside of Treasury. Like, for instance, I intend to engage the Public Investment Corporation, which invests about 2 trillion rands in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, that's workers' pension funds, to say we actually need a certain percentage to be set aside to support innovation. But it's not just money that we want to be set aside, that it is there sitting. It's money that should be tied to many practical projects that we have. For example, Iman, we have got projects that are looking at sanitation in rural schools that have got lots of prospects to actually expand, including also saving water, new agricultural technologies, taking into account that we are a water-scarce country. We need to upscale those. Yeah. So when one goes to the PICs to say, here are projects that are succeeding, but they are just too small, we need so much money to actually upscale this. Also, we are going to be engaging the private sector, which we've been doing. Also, not to say, give us more money, but to say, give us money to do A, B, C, D in order to be able to upscale. For instance, some of the things we are doing, very good work in mining.
Minister, before you move forward, pardon me, just before you move forward into some of those areas, let's go to the gambit that you presented in Parliament, acknowledging the underfunding as you've done now, but pointing to the PPPs as the solution. We've heard parties like the MK and the EFF say that these PPPs risk corporate capture. So what safeguards would you say, Minister, are in place to ensure that science policy remains in the public interest and not driven necessarily by profit motives?
Very important. Of course, you can't avoid the fact that if you partner with the private sector, they will want to invest in something that brings profits to them. That's a reality that you actually face when you partner with the private sector. But we are putting in place mechanisms, for instance, to ensure that we are able to agree on patents. Who owns that particular technology? If that technology has been funded by public money, it must actually be owned by government. And then we are able to work with partners to say, let's then upscale the production of these things. That is one way of actually dealing with this particular problem, so that you do not have the private sector just, in a way, stealing these products and intellectual property and running away with them. But at the end of the day, you can't run away with the fact that they have to make a profit. As long as out of that profit, monies also flow back to actually fund research. But it's not only the private sector, by the way. There are also public, state-owned enterprises that we are working with now, like Denel. Denel has got massive facilities that we are working with to ensure that we are able to develop our space technologies and space sciences by partnering with Denel, which is also a public. We used to work with ESCOM very well. We are also working with private companies that were originally state-owned companies, like on hydrogen. We are working with Sasol. We are also partnering with the Japanese and so on.
Right.
So those are some of the things that we are doing to ensure that we don't have what I call leakage. There's lots of leakage in the whole of the African continent. Things, you remember at some stage, Iman, that some American company wanted to patent rooibos tea as American tea, which is actually a South African indigenous product. And we had actually to fight that. So from the lessons that we have learned, we need a regime that's going to allow that ownership in publicly funded research remains in the hands of the public.
So funding is on the one side, and as you say, profit making is not something that anyone should be averse to, as long as it goes back to the people who should be benefiting the most, and that the policy designs are in their best interest. But you also spoke of taking science and innovation to the townships and the villages. This is something opposition parties also say seems to be largely rhetoric. So share with our viewers tangible evidence that rural communities are benefiting from the DSTI'S programs.
It's not rhetoric. First of all, we've got some programs that we are doing with the Department of Basic Education. They are not as massive as we would like them to be. For instance, we've got a project where we are converting containers into becoming computer labs, which we are donating to schools, as low as primary school, so that young people from the rural areas are able to begin to benefit on that school. We've also built science facilities. I wish I could take yourselves, Iman, to some of the rural projects that we are doing. There's a science center, for instance, in Kofimbaba, which is doing something wonderful. That it's not just that beautiful science center where students visit, but it's connected to 17 schools, such that, for instance, if you have got a very good mathematics teacher, you are able to connect 17 schools for that teacher to actually speak to schools, maths students or maths learners in 17 schools and be able to benefit out of that. There is a lot of that we are doing. Also, we've got scholarships. Our scholarships, we make sure that also a certain percentage goes to rural areas. Just like now, for instance, 55% of our postgraduate scholarships are meant for women in order to address the problems that we are actually talking about.
Yeah.
So there is lots that we are doing in rural areas. It's not enough, let me admit, but which actually begins to show that we can be able to do more and that we can't leave rural areas behind. Inevitably, technology at the moment is urban-centered, but that's what we must also do. So, which is what we are addressing, as I'm giving you this practical example.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many areas. I'm just, sort of agree that we don't have enough time, because the issues around postgraduate research, There are issues around governance and oversight at TIA, which is meant to be a centrifuge, really, in making sure that there's momentum behind some of these projects. But maybe if you can just quickly, Minister, just high level, share with us what projects are likely to fall by the wayside. One can appreciate the resourcefulness, and as you say, you're making inroads in certain areas that you strategically wanted to, but what projects are at risk? What initiatives are at risk?
Well, some of the initiatives that are at risk is that we are not increasing the numbers that we want. For instance, in terms of women researchers, much as we are funding more, but the amount of money that is available is not enough. The other problem that we have is the pipeline from schooling, producing the necessary numbers that we actually need, and the pass rate of not less than 60% if you want to be following scientific or engineering programs.
Yeah.
Pass in math and science. Those are some of the areas that are like a really deep problem. That is why part of our activities is actually to try and tackle this thing of fear of maths and science, which is still a very common thing, You will find some school principals saying, no, drop out of doing pure maths and do functional, maths literacy. That's what it is called now, because they want to improve the pass rate. But the problem with that is that it actually interferes with the kind of pipeline that we need. Those are some of the things that we actually need to be doing. Infrastructure is going to suffer. For instance, the cuts that we have experienced are going to affect some science infrastructure that we actually need to build. For instance, the 300 million that we are actually talking about, largely it's money for science infrastructure that are actually a big challenge. But we are looking at ways and means. For instance, we've agreed with the new DG that one of the big things we need to do immediately is mobile laboratories, for instance, to try and overcome that there are 60% of our schools do not have laboratories. So if we do mobile, we are not going to have each school having a laboratory, but you can actually have a truck that actually does a district that on certain days it's at particular schools and on other days it's at particular schools. To try and overcome this in a relatively cheaper, not that it's inexpensive, but in a relatively cheaper way, to try and use the monies that we have in order to expand. But let me admit, unless as government, but not government alone, we pull together. That is why our mission now says we want to place science, technology, and innovation at the center of government, at the center of education, at the center of industry, and at the center of society, because we want the whole of South Africa to understand that we are not going to develop as a country unless we put more money into science, technology, and innovation.
And we should speak again when those, mobile units are on the ground and through schools, because, essentially we want to see a lot more activity happening in terms of the deployment of those resources and then having the strategic change that you're talking about. Minister Nzimande, before I let you go, there's a moment we are in, and I'm just pivoting away from your budget address now, because we've been speaking to cabinet ministers and leaders. Tonight, you would have seen a statement from the judiciary responding on the Mkhwanazi matter, which I'm sure you, like all South Africans, are concerned about. We saw that news conference at the weekend. We're in a moment also where the president is going to address the matter on Sunday at 7. But it has shaken the foundation of South African society. So I'd love your thoughts as a leader. Of course, you are a senior leader in the SACP. Your thoughts on this moment, and then I have a second question for you on this as well. And perhaps even a message to South Africans who are wondering what on earth is going on and who do we trust?
Look, my own stance really is that the president has issued a statement and made an indication that he takes this matter very seriously. I agree with that. That allegations of this nature are very serious. They need to be taken up. And the president is going to be addressing the nation on Sunday. And we are hoping that out of that he will come up with a way of actually getting into the depth of this matter and leaving no stone unturned. Allegations that have been made have got to be proven. That is the main thing. We are guided by the rule of law as a country. If allegations are made, of course, if they are serious, we must take them seriously. But they also have to be proven. We hope that the president is actually going to come up with mechanisms that are going to get into the bottom of this matter and avoid grandstanding as some political parties are doing, behaving as if, all these things have been proven or not. Of course, political parties, they tend to do that, being very opportunistic. I think we will do ourselves a big favor as a country if we wait for the president to come up with a way of actually dealing with these things so that we get into the bottom of this matter as to what the problem really is about. Some of these problems,
No, go ahead, sir.
No, I'm saying some of these problems are not new, for instance, We know that in the past, organs of the state have been abused in many ways. The police, in the intelligence in the past, it was being used also even to fight internal party political battles in the ANC and the alliance, Maybe this is an opportunity then for the president to provide a way forward that will make us to go into the bottom of those things so that the police, the judiciary, everybody is able to do what is supposed to be done. For instance, some of the allegations is that some of the judges and some of the magistrates are possibly bought to be able to act in a particular way. This is an opportunity to go to the bottom of this matter. That's my view.
Yeah. I mean, I can appreciate what you say about the opportunism in general, political opportunism. But, we have a minister, Senzo Mchunu, earlier this year in Parliament saying that he had no association to one of the central characters in this theatre of corruption, alleged corruption, Brown Mokhotsi. And then yesterday issuing a statement that, he doesn't have any association with him, but he knows him. And, he is a comrade. So there's a case that they're pursuing, the DA and the MK is, on having breached the rules of Parliament. You know these well, right? Because to lie to a parliamentary committee is a serious and potentially criminal offence.
Well, Iman, what I would really like to say, it's precisely that I think we need to be cautious on how we tread these things. I don't want the situation now, in the light of these allegations, then to act as if conclusively Minister Mchunu has told a lie. We don't know. That actually needs to be proven itself. And I think my call is to say, as South Africans, yes, we must be alarmed by this. It's understandable. Yes, this thing, we must go into the bottom of them. But let's allow due process to actually go into this, because maybe the good thing about what the Provincial Commissioner of the Police has done in KZN is to raise these things, which then gives an opportunity for one to actually go right into. At face value, I can't then say, Minister Mchunu has lied or Minister Mchunu has not lied and so on. I would rather say, let us be very cautious. By the way, the reason why I'm saying this, Iman, I myself have been a victim, in the past of being listened to by intelligence agencies, being followed up as to where one goes and so on, with a view of actually trying to discredit. I know this very well. I was a victim of this during Fees Must Fall, for instance, But what came out of that in the end? Nothing came out of that.
Yeah,
what I'm saying,
but you've got to appreciate,
important that the media as well, we allow due process to take its course.
I mean, you've got to appreciate, though, Dr. Nzimande, when it comes from a provincial police commissioner who was once the acting head of, was once the acting national commissioner, there's a different gravitas, right, that comes with his office, or do you disagree with that?
No, I don't disagree. That's why I said right from the beginning, these allegations are made by a very senior member of the police, the provincial commissioner. So they must be taken seriously. President has said as such, these allegations are very serious. But what is the best way of dealing with them? You know, we shouldn't be tempted and say we choose the juicy parts, you know, and so on. The minister may have done this or has actually not done this. It's something that's of concern. You know, the provincial commissioner says, for instance, there are drug lords and drug dealers who have got big problems with drugs. Maybe what he has opened up is also going to allow us to be able to get to the bottom as to who are these drug dealers? Who are they actually linked with? I'm not by any means minimizing this, as I have said right from the word go. But my stance is that let's give due process to actually go to the bottom of this matter.
Have you counseled Senzo Mqunu, final and quickly, Dr. Nzimande, so sorry again to have kept you longer than I intended. Have you counseled him, spoken to him? Has he reached out? You know, what advice are you giving, if any?
No.
Okay.
We are colleagues, you know, we come and attend similar meetings, you know, and so I haven't on my side, you know, because what do I say? Do I say, hey, Maqingwana, what is actually going on? He has himself actually said publicly that at an appropriate time he'll be able to answer this.
All right.
And I hope he does.
Dr. Nzimande, thanks for your time this evening. Appreciate it.